Welcome back to Old School Sports and our OOTP 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at opening day of the 2035 season as the Royals begin their title defense of the 2034 World Series Championship. You can see we've got some money to add some players as the season goes along, so probably will be active in the trade market. Was a relatively busy offseason for the Royals. We didn't really add much talent into our day-to-day lineup. The two big moves we made were signing our two best players, Bobby Witt Jr. and Alex Vasquez, to long extensions. Hopefully the extension with Bobby Witt Jr. will keep him in Kansas City for the remainder of his career. And hopefully the extension with Vasquez, which goes into effect next season, will keep him in Kansas City through the prime of his career. Other than that, the only surprise coming out of spring training is that Rodolfo Falcone is going to be our starting left fielder / DH. And Javi Medina, who was our Rule 5 acquisition, made the final roster. See him as a player who's got a lot of upside. We're going to have to keep him on the roster all year as our fifth outfielder. You can see he's never been above A-ball before in his career, but I just think he's got really interesting potential. So hopefully we don't slow his development too much this year by theoretically having him get 150, 200 at-bats as a fifth outfielder for us. And then next season, we're able to kind of put him back down into AA or AAA to hopefully get him some more seasoning and get him completely developed. So with those two on the roster, Mike McNeil did not make the 26-man roster. He was our number one pick a few years ago in 2032. Had a brilliant year in AAA last year, hitting .348 with 27 homers and 84 runs batted in. But he did not hit much when he was up in Kansas City last year. Admittedly, a small sample size of just 63 at-bats. But given that manager Bobby Crosby intends to use Falcone more regularly, we thought it made more sense to put McNeil back down into AAA to get him hopefully some more playing time, because I think he will be an important part of our team down the line. Last year's number one draft pick, Jonathan Ojeda, did make the Major League roster. Pitching staff, we had more changes to. Invested pretty significantly at the top end of our pitching staff, added Bryce Hillman in a trade from Pittsburgh, added Felipe Tejada to close in a trade with Arizona, and then we added Jose Garces, Jesus Bibbs, and Min-Ho Choi as relievers through free agency. We lost a lot of longtime pitchers in the offseason to free agency, and hopefully this allowed us to rebuild our pitching staff a bit. Do have a couple players that we're not thrilled about. One is Gordon Graceffo, been an important pitcher for us, important member of our starting rotation for several years now. But you can see at age 35, his stuff is just not good at this point. I don't know that I've ever pitched a full season or even any significant playing time at all for a pitcher with 35 stuff at the major league level. So it'll potentially be an interesting learning experience to see how well, or more accurately, probably how poorly he performs with that kind of stuff. The other pitcher at the back end of our pitching staff that we don't necessarily love is Dylan Carter, 33-year-old who was our 19th round draft pick in 2023. He's been hanging around in our minor league system for over a decade. You can see he's got decent stuff, but not great movement, not great control. Was okay last year with a 3.85 ERA in AAA, but we would consider moving on from either of those two players. And fortunately for us, there's an interesting player on the waiver wire, Nomar Medina, a left-hander who's making $4.4 million, was cut by the Dodgers. And you can see he's really got nice stuff, pretty good control, acceptable movement. He's definitely going to give up some home runs because he's a extreme fly ball pitcher who only throws in the low 90s and has that 45 movement. But with his changeup and his fastball, two very good pitches, an acceptable slider. And over the course of his career, he's definitely been an above average starter with a 117 ERA plus, 82 FIP minus, and 2.76 SIERA. I should say he's been an above average pitcher. He's never started a game in his entire career. And he's also slightly more effective against left-handers than he is against righties, with a little better control. So I think given that we do have money to take on a contract, I think we may put in a claim for Medina right now, see whether it goes through or not. And if we are able to claim him and bring him on board, then we may need to figure out whether we want to move on from either Dylan Carter or Gordon Graceffo. And the only other thing to note before we get the season underway is that Rich Alvarado, one of our young infielders, put him on the 10-day IL, has a strained Achilles tendon that's going to be impacting him for the next week or two. Because of that, Billy Dominguez, another relatively young infielder, made the 26-man roster. And some good news, we did get Nomar Funky Cold Medina to sign with us, or I guess we made the waiver claim and no one else put in a claim above us on him, which would be hard to do since we're coming off of the World Series, so it doesn't seem like anyone else was willing to pay him almost $4.5 a year. He is actually signed through next season, so it's a bit of a financial commitment for the Royals. But as I kind of alluded to, I think that he is a much better pitcher than either Dylan Carter or Gordon Graceffo. So now we're going to have to figure out which one of them we want to move on from. Carter would be relatively easy to move on from because he's got 3 option years left. Graceffo out of option years, and more importantly, making $4 million a year. So a little harder to move on from Graceffo, but I think it's going to be a potentially really nasty season with that 35 stuff. And I think we're going to move on from Graceffo. We can get Hector Calvillo from the Dodgers. He's a 28-year-old first baseman, not all that exciting a player. He'd be a AAA player for us, and unfortunately he's got no option years left, so we're going to have to waive and DFA him just to get him down to AAA. But they are willing to throw in some cash, and more importantly, they're willing to take Graceffo off of our hands. I just don't have the stomach to see what a 35 stuff pitcher does at the major league level over the course of a full season and pay him $4 million to see how he does. I guess it would be interesting to learn. But this is still a team that is hopefully competing for the World Series again. So I think we thank Gordon Graceffo for being an important member of our pitching staff. You can see this; he's been with us for 5 years, was a regular starter for the first 4 years, and then kind of moved into more of a bullpen role last year after a pretty slow start. You can see he's never had a great ERA with us. The best he ever put up with is a 4.37 in his first season. Kind of been a 4th or 5th starter for us through most of his career, but he got a couple of world championships in those 5 years he pitched with us. So was an important member of the team at the time, kind of rounding out the back end of our rotation. But we are going to move on and trade him for Calvillo. And the one thing that we're probably not set up to have happen to us just happened here on April 7th. Ace pitcher Ben Borgman, defending AL Cy Young Award winner, out for 3 months with a torn triceps. So that is definitely going to fracture his season. Hopefully we'll get him back and healthy by sometime in late July. Hopefully we'll still be in the pennant race by the time he joins us, but certainly not optimal that Ben Borgman is going to be headed to the 60-day injured list. And we've now simmed here to April 23rd. A solid start for the Royals, 13-9, but we are 4 games behind in the division. So looks like the Guardians are off to an exceptional start at 17-5. If the season were to end today, we'd be the first wild card team. So I guess that's something. But hopefully we can make up some ground on them in the coming weeks. Did get some good news yesterday. Bobby Witt Jr. hit his 300th homer. You can see he's a little banged up with a knee contusion right now, but having a solid year. 312 batting average, 4 homers and 11 ribbies through his first 21 games. As I talked about at the start of the episode, we recently signed him to an extension. We're going to be paying him a lot of money for someone who's probably a declining player at this age. $40 million this year, and then that number is going to steadily decline to his age 39 season when he has a vesting option. But he's still a productive offensive player at this point, still has pretty good speed. You know, looking at those stats that he's put up, he's got an outside chance of getting to 400 home runs, got an outside chance of getting to 3,000 hits, should get to 1,500 runs, outside chance of getting to 1,500 runs batted in, and probably can get to 500 stolen bases. So with a 76 WAR at this point for his career, he's certainly on the margins of the Hall of Fame discussion at this point, and I would think another 3 or 4 real good strong seasons hopefully among his final 5 or 6 years in the majors, and hopefully he'll conclude a Hall of Fame career with us. And Mike McNeil, who I mentioned, other than developing a little home run power, really doesn't have any need to be in AAA. But we've got him there because we think he'll get more at-bats there. But he is crushing the ball with a .396 batting average, 5 homers and 16 runs batted in through his first 12 games this year in AAA, and was just named the International League Player of the Week. And we've made it to the month of May, 19-10 record for the Royals, so off to a great start, although we are still 3 games behind the red-hot Guardians. A ton of honors for the teams. Edgar Ruiz, best player in the Carolina League for the month, hit .355, 6 home runs, 14 ribbies. Certainly doesn't look like he's a big-time major league prospect. Looks like at best he could be a replacement level 5th outfielder in the majors. You can see he's been in A-ball for the last couple years, and we haven't moved him up. But with the fact that he's hitting pretty well there, maybe he can get moved up later this year. More importantly, Eddie Chavera, 5-0 record, 2.29 ERA. So he has definitely stepped in and helped fill the gap caused by the loss of Ben Borgman. Rodolfo Falcone, American League Rookie of the Month. We mentioned that we ended up having him on the roster rather than McNeil. And Falcone hitting .314, 4 homers, 15 ribbies in his first month in the major leagues. So he's done a good job for us. McNeil, the guy that whose roster spot he took, continues to rake, hitting .414 for the month with 8 home runs down in AAA. And also in AAA, Dan Keogh, the pitcher of the month, 3-0 record with a 2.35 ERA in 30 2/3 innings. Keogh was our 2nd-round draft pick back in 2028 and is definitely one of the top pitching prospects that we have. Can see he's got really good stuff, acceptable control, great curveball, great changeup, acceptable fastball. Only concern is that he doesn't have a lot of movement on his pitches, and he doesn't throw all that hard. He is a neutral pitcher, rather than an extreme fly ball pitcher. But you can see even off to this good start, he has given up 5 home runs in AAA. So he could be someone who could help us at the major league level in the not so distant future. Certainly if we have another injury to the starting rotation, I would think that Keogh would definitely be in the mix of people to bring up. Would feel great about him as a prospect if he had a little more movement on his pitches. looking at the OSA ratings, and they kind of do think he can maybe be a little better movement-wise. So we'll hope that they're a little more accurate about what his movement is than our scout is. And just suffered another injury to the pitching staff. Jose Garces, one of the free agents we signed this offseason, has been pretty good so far with a 1.64 ERA in 11 innings. But a sprained UCL, in addition to a stomach virus, the sprained UCL that's going to keep him out for 4 weeks is a lot more significant. So unfortunately, we will be without him for the next month. Don't know if we're going to bring up Keogh to replace him. But he is certainly in the mix. Probably will bring Kin Omasako, who we had up earlier for a little bit when there were some injuries. You can see he pitched well in 5 games, 1.23 ERA over 7 1/3 innings. So we're going to give Keogh just a little bit more seasoning down in AAA before we potentially bring him up to help at the major league level. Some good news yesterday, a 3-home run game for Bobby Witt Jr., so his strong age 34 season continues. Already has 9 homers and 28 ribbies here on May 9th. Bad news is our young second baseman, Aragetto Laziosi, out with a broken hand for 3 months. Was not hitting much at all this year, just a .185 and 124 at-bats, but certainly profiles as a pretty good offensive player and a pretty darn good and versatile defensive player. So not optimal that we will be without the young second baseman for half of the year. But we do have some pretty good depth, particularly in our infield. Probably means some more playing time for Rich Alvarado, and will also mean that we are able to bring back up Billy Dominguez, who, as I mentioned, started on the major league roster for us this year when Alvarado was actually on the injured list, and now they will both probably get a little bit more playing time at the major league level. Interesting, even after being Rookie of the Month, Falcone is now out of the lineup for Javi Medina. Interesting. Our Rule 5 acquisition is holding his own in the majors with a .235 batting average, 1 homer, 4 runs driven in over 34 at-bats. But it looks like manager Bobby Crosby wants to get him a little bit of extra playing time. Falcone's still hitting really well with a .301 average over 113 at-bats, but I'll defer to our manager on this one. I think certainly as far as who is the potentially better player over the long term, I think it's certainly Javi Medina rather than Rodolfo Falcone. So if the manager wants to get Medina a little extra playing time, by all means do it. Checking in on one other rookie, Jonathan Ojeda, our first-round pick last year, hitting for the type of power that we would expect at the major league level with 10 home runs in his first 141 at-bats. Batting just .220, though, and only 19 runs batted in. So he has been a feast or famine kind of player with 10 home runs in 141 at-bats, but also 46 strikeouts. But putting up pretty average-ish numbers overall. So we're going to let the 21-year-old continue to develop right here at the major league level. And our new closer, who we picked up in trade, doing really well, Felipe Tejada, with a 20-game shutdown streak. Looking at his numbers for the season, 14 saves in 21 games with a 0.50 ERA, 28 strikeouts in 18 innings. He's in the final year of his contract, and he's also 37 years old, so probably not our long-term answer at closer, but certainly doing a really good job for us this year. And we've made it to the month of June and a potentially magical season by our veteran superstar Bobby Witt Jr. continues, voted AL Batter of the Month for the month of May. And you can see that here, 200 at-bats into the season, he's got 16 doubles, 15 homers, 44 runs batted in, 11 stolen bases, 310 batting average, putting up a 175 OPS plus and a 173 WRC plus. So almost 35 years old, going to turn 35 years old 13 days from now. And the perennial Gold Glove winner and perennial All-Star is potentially putting up the best season of his career for these Royals. And we've needed every one of those hits that he's been putting up, because you can see we're still in second place in the AL Central, closing the gap slowly on the Guardians, 2 games behind them now, although we've slipped a little bit over the last 10. Looking at the league leaders here through the first couple months of the season, our rookie slugger, Jonathan Ojeda, has the batting average up to 244, leading the American League with 19 homers, and he's driven in 45 runs. Bobby Witt Jr., who we just talked about, is second in the league in OPS and third in batter WAR at this point. And then Eddie Chavera, who had that brilliant April, second in the American League with 7 wins. So a few Royals among the league leaders at this point, still dealing with the injury issues. They were, kind of long-term injuries when they happened. Borgman's still out for about another 5 weeks. Starting second baseman Laziosi out for a couple of months. And Jose Garces has really been struggling with that sprained UCL. His injury time is unknown at this point, but hopefully we'll have all 3 of them back. I would hope Borgman and Garces by June, certainly, and then Laziosi potentially in early to mid-August. And we've made it midway to the season, 50-31 record, 617 winning percentage, and you can see that we now are in first place. We've gotten past the Guardians. Ownership continues to be a bit spoiled, I think. They apparently think that a 617 winning percentage is nothing that gets them too excited, but not terrible. They're also not happy with our financial situation, so even though we're coming off of a World Series championship, the stadium is filled just about every day to capacity. We've got incredible fan interest, good fan loyalty, and when you look at our accounting, we actually are expected to make some money this year, even not including a potential playoff run. Just can't make ownership that happy. I think that we've spoiled them a bit with our success over these 13 seasons, now in our 14th season running these Royals. And the top 1 prospect list was the top 100 prospect list was just released. You can see our former prospect Maxime De La Cruz, who we traded to the Phillies organization a couple years ago when we picked up Eddie Chavera back in A-ball this year, hitting .316 with 5 homers, 27 ribbies, and 190 at-bats. Certainly his personality still remains a strength, and certainly looks like he could be a very good major league hitter with excellent contact. His power is trending towards average-ish kind of levels, maybe a little bit above average if he completely develops, but gonna potentially have a really nice contact bat. But as we talked about, Chavera is having a pretty good year for us and was part of a World Series championship team last year, so not having any second thoughts about the trade. Looking broadly at the organization and our prospects, we've got $24 million in scouting again, $36 million in development again, and minor league system 19th out of 30. So we still definitely have some work to do. You can see Keogh and McNeil, who we've talked about, both could be in the majors relatively shortly. 2 of our better prospects in AAA, but they are top 200 prospects, not top 100 type prospects. Only have 3 of those, and the center fielder, Gilberto Romero, who was our international free agent signing last year, still at our complex. Jose Carranza, young starting pitcher who was our first round draft pick back in 2033. 20 years old, hasn't gotten out of rookie ball yet, but could certainly see us moving him up to A ball over the next couple of months. Hopefully, he'll have a little more success in rookie ball before we do that. And then Bobby Cintrone, who's in high A ball, hitting 257 this year, 3 homers, 36 ribbies. Still looks like he can potentially develop into a decent bat. But for a free agent international signing from 6 years ago at this point, and a player who's 23 years old, he hasn't developed as rapidly as we would have hoped. But hopefully he'll still develop enough to be a contributor at the major league level in a few seasons. And as we get to the end of June, we're on July 1st now, looking at the standings. Still a big battle here in the AL Central this year, but we have opened up a 3-game lead on the Twins, and the Guardians, after that brilliant start, are now 3.5 back. Our .624 winning percentage is the best in the American League at this point, second best in baseball behind the Cubs. So the season's gone really well thus far. You can see Bobby Witt Jr. now third in the AL batting race, leading the league in OPS, second in batter WAR, although you can also see we're injured with a diagnosis pending. So it seems like for each of the last several seasons, Bobby Witt's ended up missing about a month, sometime in late spring, early summer. You can see if you look closely, played 123 games in 2033 and then 122 games last year. The hope is that injury is not that serious, because he's putting up another really nice season and probably going to be in contention certainly for a Silver Slugger award, maybe get some MVP votes, and would think that he's going to be an all-star. And his range is kind of declining as he gets older, but hopefully can still add a couple more gold gloves to his trophy cabinet before he hangs it up. Victor Avelar, who had the brilliant Rookie of the Year season for us last year, does have a 15-game hitting streak this year. 263 average with 16 homers and 62 ribbies, so not quite the offensive force that he was a year ago, but still a nice sophomore campaign. Caleb Lagerwell, 10-5 record, which is good for second in the AL in wins, and his 2.83 ERA is third in the American League right now. So some of our veterans, in the case of Lagerwell and Bobby Witt Jr., kind of all over the AL leaderboard here on July 1st of 2035. And before we finish up the episode, we'll take a look at the international amateur free agents. Taking a look at the pitchers, a couple that stand out. Ivan Pedraza, a 16-year-old from the Dominican. Nice personality with good leadership, loyalty, and adaptability. Certainly looks like he's going to have good stamina. He's a ground ball pitcher who's already throwing in the low 90s at the age of 16. You can see his stuff is potentially filthy, and he also potentially has plus movement and plus control. Only has 3 pitches, so the hope is that this curveball, sinker, and fastball all develop. But if they do, he definitely looks like he could be a front-end starter as a left-handed pitcher. Javi Toledo, at least according to our scout Travis Lee, also stands out a bit. Love the high leadership, work ethic, and intelligence. That's a great personality. Excellent stamina, really good at holding runners, durable. Also a lefty. You can see he's also a 3-pitch pitcher, so you just got to make sure that those 3 pitches develop, and then they can probably be a pretty effective starter. Doesn't have quite the stuff, but pretty solid movement and control. So a couple of interesting prospects, at least according to our scout. Our scouting accuracy on them is certainly not great. Taking a look at what the OOTP Scouting Association, they like Pedraza even a little more than Toledo. So couple of interesting prospects there among the pitchers. Turning to the batters, you can see there's 3 5-star potential players, at least according to our scout, although to be fair, his scouting accuracy on all 3 of them is low at this point. So the first of the five-star prospects is the right fielder Jorge Aguirre. Certainly looks like he can have an excellent bat. His contact and his home run power both look incredible. Durable player, good work ethic. Not a ton of speed, definitely a corner outfielder, and he is already 18 years old, so a little older than some of the international prospects, but certainly a bat to think about adding. Catcher Al Davia from Venezuela. Again, like the high work ethic, looks like he could be an above average defensive catcher when all is said and done, who potentially has a plus bat. So decent prospect there, also close to 18 years old. And then last but not least, among the potential five-star prospects is third baseman Alex Mendoza. Yeah, third base is about the only position he could play in the infield. I guess you could also play him at first, but definitely not a great defensive player. Does potentially have excellent contact and home run power. Not a ton of speed. Couple prospects that our scout at least doesn't think are quite as good. Our second baseman Juan Arambula, 16-year-old out of the Dominican, great personality. Pretty good range, although a little sloppy when he does get to the ball with a low error, with a medium error rating, and then a real poor arm. So, yeah, you could play him at second. You could play him at left field if you had to, but his arm is just a disaster. So not all that interesting a prospect, at least according to our scout. OSA definitely thinks a little more of him. And then there's also Victor Cotto, shortstop. Looks like he potentially could have a decent bat. Not really a shortstop, more of a second baseman. Maybe you could play him at third. You could also play him in left or right, although his error rating is pretty mediocre in the outfield. So take a look and just see what the OOTP Scouting Association thinks. They mention Aguirre, Arambula, Davila, Mendoza, and then they also like Cotto, who we talked about. Then they also like the catcher Hector Santa Cruz. Our scout is much less optimistic about him. Good personality, but doesn't look like he's ever going to hit much according to our scout. So interesting class this year. I'm honestly most intrigued by the pitchers. I don't love the fact that we're low accuracy on Ivan Pedraza, but I do really like what it looks like he can develop into, and the OSA is not quite as positive on him. But a 16-year-old who's already throwing in the low 90s, who's a ground ball pitcher, is interesting. Javi Toledo, like with him, the durability, like the work ethic and intelligence, like the stamina. I don't think either our scout or the OSA thinks that he is quite the pitcher that Pedraza can potentially be, but these are also 16-year-olds that we don't have necessarily great scouting on at this point. So in a perfect world, I'd scout these guys for another week or so and get those scouting accuracies up higher, but by the time I get those scouting reports back, they're likely going to have signed with somebody, so I don't quite have that luxury. I think I'm going to go with Pedraza. In the limited amount that we know about him, our scout thinks he's the best of the pitching prospects that are out there. Certainly looks like someone who, if he develops fully, would be a very good major league starter. So we are going to go ahead and make Pedraza an offer for $5 million rather than the $4 million that he's looking for. And we'll find out what he's thinking about that in our next episode. But before we turn things over to that next episode, I'm going to just check in on some of the team statistics. You can see we were 500 in March, and we've had a pretty good winning percentage in both April, May, and June, although we are kind of trending a little weaker over the course of the season. The offense has been fantastic, first in the league in runs scored, second in home runs, which is a very rare occurrence for these Royals. You can see we are first in almost all of the offensive categories, although we are last in the league in walks. That would be a skill that hopefully we can develop over time, get some players with a better eye, but certainly not going to complain about being last in walks when we're still first in runs scored. And we're also first in the American League in runs allowed. Our starter ERA is the best in the league. Bullpen ERA is middle of the pack, but you can see we're also first in a lot of the pitching categories. Also first in defensive efficiency, first in zone rating. The best offense and the best pitching staff, and that adds up to the best record. When you look at the expanded stats, we're actually right where we should be with that plus 14 run differential. So hopefully we can keep expanding our lead on the Twins and the Guardians here in the AL Central over the coming weeks. Would obviously be helpful to our chances to repeat if we're able to clinch home field for as long as possible in the playoffs and also avoid that wild card round. Taking a look at our offensive players, we've already talked a lot about Bobby Witt Jr. Obviously, the key thing we're going to have to find out with him in our next episode is what's going on with that injury. But with a 5.2 WAR midway through the season, he's having a potential MVP caliber year. Angelo Velasquez, our center fielder, hitting .318, 16 stolen bases. Alex Vasquez, after signing the big extension, a .278 batting average is not what we would normally expect from him midway through the year, but 27 doubles, 21 homers, and 51 ribbies. Other than the batting average, seems like it's a vintage Vasquez season. Our catcher, Angelo Bolden, has put up a 2 WAR, .296 batting average, 7 home runs, so getting a little more offense out of him than usual. We've talked about the rookie Ojeda, 23 homers, 61 ribbies. Tony Fonseca, our excellent defensive shortstop, hitting just .230 this year, but still a positive WAR player owing to his outstanding defense. The youngster, Javi Medina, holding his own at the major league level. So this Rule 5 acquisition potentially could become a real interesting player for us. Have to keep him in the majors for the rest of the year, but he's hitting a .273 with 9 homers and 172 at-bats. So he's definitely holding his own at the major league level, and you can see he's continued to develop. Looks like a player who ultimately could have plus contact, outstanding gap power, and plus home run power. So another corner outfielder for us in the glut of corner outfielders, but we'll still take him potentially. Willie Flores, the young infielder, hitting .275. Victor Avelar, last year's Rookie of the Year, .263, 16 homers, 62 ribbies. Rodolfo Falcone, still hitting .300 as a rookie, 7 homers, 24 ribbies. Alvarado, .264. Billy Dominguez, .321 in limited action. Backup catcher Leo Aguilar hitting .242, but still a positive WAR player. The only disappointment has been Laziosi with that .185 batting average, and he is still on the IL with that broken hand for another 3 weeks. So hopefully when he does get back and healthy, he'll be even more productive. But it's been a pretty good offensive year from these Royals so far, as we talked about earlier, with the best offense in the American League thus far. And turning to the pitching staff, with our ace Borgman, defending Cy Young winner, on the IL most of the year. Caleb Lagerwell, 10-5 with a 2.83 ERA, and Eddie Chavera, 9-6 with a 3.45 ERA, have taken over at the top of the rotation. Bryce Hillman, who we traded for last offseason, 8-6 record, which is fine, but the 5.69 ERA is definitely ugly. You can see that his Sierra is 3.93. And his BABIP is 347, so seems like he's potentially been a little bit unlucky. Hopefully we'll get a better performance out of him the second half of the year. Tyler Bosma, 500 record with a 482 ERA, and Bryce Hubbard is a follower, 5-6 with a 5.38 ERA. So the back end of the rotation certainly could be better. We've talked about Tejada. He's not pitching as well as he was, but still his 18 saves and a 2.10 ERA. Garces back off the IL at 2.38 ERA. Jesus Bibbs with a 2.15 ERA. Those were three of the additions to our bullpen this offseason, all pitching very well. Andrew Bonds, 25-year-old youngster, made his major league debut for us due to some of the injuries. He's been fine. Min-Ho Choi, a little disappointing for another one of our free agent acquisitions, 4.74 ERA. And then Nomar Funky Cole Medina, who we picked up when the Dodgers waived him, has also been, average with a 4.56 ERA. The veteran, at least in terms of his age, 33 years old, Dylan Carter, finally making his major league debut this year with a 2.68 ERA. And then Bob Williams, who at this point, at the age of 27, is one of our more established relievers, a 3.29 ERA over 27 and a third innings pitched. So the first half of the season for the Royals here in 2035 has gone really well. As I talked about, the big things we're going to find out at the start of our next episode is how serious is this injury to Bobby Witt Jr., and hopefully we'll also find out shortly whether our offer to the international free agent Ivan Pedraza is accepted. But we will find the answers to those questions in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.